r/AskReddit. What's that story you've never been able to tell? Around 42 years ago, my little brother was playing with matches and set the woods on fire, burned about 10 acres. Everyone assumed that it was me smoking in the woods, so he and I just let it be me. I took the blame and the ass whooping because dad was kinda rough on the ass whoopings when he was mad, and I didn't want my little brother to have to take it. Being that dad got a little carried away this time, broke my arm. We've just never told anyone the truth. In 6th grade, we had this paper we had to write. I forget what the subject was. I decided to procrastinate a lot. Then the day it was due rolled around, and I had nothing. We had to read our papers out loud in front of the class. I was totally prepared to take the 0. But then I realized he wasn't actually taking the papers we used. So I decided to go up to the front of the class with a blank sheet of paper and improvise. I ended up getting an 80. When I was just a boy, I was touched when I was getting my hair cut. My father had to make a quick run to the ATM, so we were alone. I never realized it affected me that much and honestly didn't even think about it for years until I drove by the place where the barber shop used to be and just felt immense stress. I would never tell my father. He has always been insecure about whether or not he's been a good father to me. This would make him hate himself. Oh boy, I'm in a very similar boat. I was molested for years by a trusted teacher, not a school teacher, but I'll keep it vague. Kinda suppressed it for a few years before I realized how it might have ducked me up long term. Currently trying to save money for a therapist. I can't ask my grandparents, who paid for the lessons, or my parents, who were very supportive of the activity he was teaching. They'd be devastated. I didn't want to tell anybody then, because I didn't want to be the kid that got molested. Now I hate myself because I know he had to have done it to other kids and I didn't come forward. He committed suicide a few years ago, and it was some BS reason about his GF breaking up with him. I hope someone blackmailed him into it. The piece of shit. I moved to the UK from Zimbabwe when I was 4. The first few years my parents spent their whole time trying to settle down. By the time I was 8 they realized we had never been to London. So on a hot June day we went into London. We went to the aquarium, Covent Garden to see all the performers. On the London Eye. It was a good day. To end the day we went to Buckingham Palace. I was tired so I was resting my head against the bars asking all the questions you'd expect from an 8-year-old. After a while my parents said it was time to go. I pushed away from the bars and then felt the cold steel against the back of my ears. I hadn't noticed my head had slipped through. I panicked. A crowd gathered. I'm probably in many a family photo album. Even a horse guard came to see what the commission was about. Bet he wasn't expecting a child with his head stuck. By then I had accepted this as my new home. But I couldn't figure out how I'd go to sleep with a spike on the floor. Luckily an old lady had a tub of Vaseline in her handbag and my dad was able to pull me out with my head smothered in Vaseline. I've told this on Reddit before but never in person. So I was at a water park with a girl I had a huge crush on and some of our mutual friends. I'm not a big fan of rides. She had been trying to talk me into going on one all day, and I finally agreed to try out this one really intense looking slide. Basically you go down the slide while sitting on this big inflatable thing. And it was for 2 people so naturally I got paired up with the girl I had a crush on. We both climbed into the inflatable, which had these little handles on it for you to hold onto when you went down. When we went down the slide, it was way faster than I thought it would be. I accidentally let go of one of the handles, tried to grab it again, and ended up grabbing her hand instead by accident. I was really embarrassed but she put her other hand on top of mine until we reached the bottom. I guess she thought I was scared, which is also kinda embarrassing. But it was a nice moment. She later went on to be my first kiss about 6 months later, and we're still close friends today. When I was about 14 I found a slingshot in the woods. It was a pretty good slingshot that must have cost a fair bit as it had a metal frame and a thick rubber sling. One day my friend and I were on top of a hill out in the countryside and a jogger came running out of the nearby tree line. He was some distance away and below us. Without putting a lot of thought into it I shot a stone just above his head. The rock went exactly where I wanted it to, but if there was wind, or my aim was off, or 1,000 other factors, I would have seriously ducked that jogger up. I muse on that at least once a week. I never see my friend and we haven't spoken about it since it happened. My mom probably has factitious disorder. She used to gather my siblings and I together to announce she has insert cancer or deadly disease here and then make us cry and hug her. She has ruined so many of my major life events to rant about herself and all of her illnesses. I haven't called to check in on her with everything that is going on because I do not want to hear her hours-long spew of disease and sickness because I always think she is lying. She may actually be at serious risk of death from COVID-19 and I still don't want to hear her talk about it. She could die and I think I would feel relief. Edit. My mom has never been officially diagnosed with any mental illness. I don't mean to sound like an armchair psychologist. She thinks psychology is nonsense and refuses to seek help. She has purposely hurt herself for attention and she is always heavily addicted to painkillers for a long time now. Edit 2. Thank you for all the kindness and stories of shared experience. Be safe in all of this craziness. I keep my sex life private IRL, so I have never told anyone about the one and only time I had sex in public, and subsequently the one and only time I got caught having sex by someone in an airplane. My BF and I were out at the deserted quarry on the edge of town and we were going at it when a little two-seater plane flew overhead. The plane then proceeded to turn around and fly over us again, this time dipping, wiggling, its wings when it was overhead. I found out when I was 28 that my dad's side of the family had been in the witness protection program my entire life, and that their names were not what I had been told. Jesus, what are they hiding from? My father seldom spoke of his wartime experiences. I've only heard 2 direct stories from his mouth. He once recounted how his brother, they fought together, was shot and later died from infection. The other memory was of his desertion. During a battle, he hurt his wrist from falling and sat there in the mud, wincing in pain and catching his breath. As he peered out, seeing all the death and destruction, he was suddenly hit with an intense feeling of futility, and not just mere futility, but he realized also the absurdity of it all. I got up and just walked away, he said, leaving my weapon right there on the ground. He disappeared into the surrounding woods, somehow managing to get back home, which was nearly 300 miles away. Weren't you worried about getting in trouble? I asked in all my childlike innocence. He explained that things were desperate by the time he entered the war. He was underage, so he lied about his name and age in order to enlist. He received little to no training and was immediately thrust into action. They had nothing on me, he said. I enlisted with little more than a handshake, although he was ineligible to receive a pension because of his false and or lacking records. I'm under the impression he never would have accepted such. He was ashamed of that part of history and developed a profound distaste for government. This story was kept pretty hushed in our family as we didn't want the surrounding community to know of his desertion and label him a coward. I, however, always admired him for doing what he did. I grew up in a very conservative household. Sex was never talked about at all, and you knew if you got caught with something you shouldn't you'd be in giant trouble. When I was 17 I bought a vibrator. I had literally no experience, even alone, but was super curious. The way it worked was you had to screw the bottom off it on to keep the batteries in and to turn it on. I put it underneath my bed and thought I had it unscrewed enough that it would stay off until later. Well, I'm downstairs listening to a CD player with my headphones on, and suddenly I hear my 2 young sisters yelling about something and running around the house. I take my headphones off and I hear BZZZZZZ echoing through the house. My room was directly above the living room, and my floor was wooden. They're feeling out, thinking there's a wasp in the house or something electrical is about to explode. Thank God my parents weren't home. They probably would have figured it out a lot easier. One sister runs upstairs, realizes it's coming from my room, and I dash ahead of her and just throw myself over the bed to feel underneath it. I turn off the vibrator and then tell them my old phone was under there and must have had an alarm on it, which made no sense. It had been months since I changed phones. They don't believe me and think it must be the pipes under my room. They tell my parents when they get home that the pipes freaked out. My family listens closely for months to see if we need to call a plumber. I decided to take my terrible secret to the grave, and then 10 years later post it on Reddit. The end. I nearly died at work. I was removing the main supply, 200V, 3P, wire on the machine we just successfully overhauled. The problem is, I wasn't aware that the main circuit breaker was still turned on. I already had the gut feeling to check the breaker, but I was stubborn and proceed to remove the wires. As I removed the second wire, I accidentally short-circuited it, creating a huge spark right in front of my eyes. First thing I did was to check my hand, which was thankfully unharmed but had visible dark spots due to the strong electric current on the short-circuiting of the wires. Good thing I was half conscious and went on to turn off the main circuit breaker. Some of my workmates saw and approached me while asking if everything was alright. After removing the wire, I took a walk and had a deep thought what might happen to me if those wires touched me. I might have suffered a severe third-degree burn, or lose a limb, or died from electrocution. Folks, always be careful and always trust your gut feeling. I was a lonely kid in the mid-2000s and I joined chat rooms like most kids teens my age. I was a little younger than the average kid on there, as far as I knew. So I lied and upped my age on them. Said I was 15 or 16 instead of 11 or 12. I never gave actual info. I said I lived in a different state. Almost always gave a fake name. I thought I was clever. I mostly used the sites to either A, talk to girls my age about life and school and boys, or B, roleplay chat with boys because my family was very strict and religious and I was curious about sex. I was super inexperienced and thought I could get some information or at least explore some different feelings from it. Looking back, that could have gone terribly wrong. However, it was the former reason that got me in trouble. A few years after my parents found out about the chat sites and grounded me permanently from the internet, without supervision. Anyway, my dad got a call at work from an FBI agent located in our state asking about me being his daughter and my email address. I had foolishly given a girl my email address and exchanged names and small talk before she asked to exchange pictures. She sent one first and it was so weird it freaked me into not sending one. The picture was so overtly sexual that I was just not interested. I forgot all about her after that. Turns out she was some 40-year-old child porn collector in a different time zone who was getting pictures from kids and swapping them around with other pedos. It was a very complicated but apparently normal thing for those types of people. My email had been found in his computer and so they had to talk to us. Since I was still a minor, I didn't reply with a picture so they weren't too worried about it. I wasn't much help, I don't think. I still refer to that person as a her when I think about it, or when I tell someone like my so. The FBI lady called later to tell my parents he had been found guilty and sent to prison. I don't know his name. I don't want it. It definitely freaked me out for a long time. 2014, it was my first night in college. My roommates, strangers, didn't show up. We lived in a 3-story apartment complex, with 4 apartments each level in a freshman building. Well, the neighbors are partying and I get out of my comfort zone and walk outside. Outside, some guys are drinking and one of the guys invites me in to party and so begins my college experience. Lo and behold, I get wasted just like many of the others. I head back to my apartment on the same level and the party has moved slightly to my apartment, but there are just like 6 people there. I start asking people to leave as I'm going to bed, but I'm so drunk. I know I don't care if they stay or go. I go to my room and there is a guy crashed in it. I tell him he doesn't need to leave, but please move over and he does. I wake up and freak out because I have a boyfriend. I check to make sure we didn't have sex. No. But you came into my apartment asking everyone to leave and told me I could stay in your bed and hopped in. Confused, I ask him to clarify. Dude, this isn't your apartment. Took about 30 seconds to realize I just arrived at the wrong apartment and slept in a stranger's bed. My first night in college. Woman face palming. I work at a cinema and while doing a general check that everything is operating smoothly, a peculiar movement caught my eye. This particular session was a Father's Day session for Pixels back in 2015. The entire crowd consisted entirely of fathers and their young children, except for the young couple ducking in the back row. Poor, innocent 16-year-old me, fresh on the job, was gobsmacked and I froze much like a deer in the headlights. I couldn't bring myself to give them the old "hey please stop ducking thanks," so the manager gave them the awkward tap on the shoulder. Cut to the end of the film. The manager and I are at the exit waiting to see the faces of the culprits. Straight out the door, operating at some serious pace, is my sister's best friend and her boyfriend. Both, surprisingly, were clearly in a great mood until she made eye contact with a stunned Ethiopian. No face has ever gone from all smiles to utter horror so quick. Edit. Grammar. About 6 months ago, I was very close to suicide. I actually was about to do it, thinking about killing myself, and at one point I had agreed to myself I would end it. I got home that night and it was just me and my cat as my fiance was at work. My cat, I think she knew I was sad, and she never sits in people's laps, sat up in my lap and proceeded to flip on her belly and play wrestle with my hand. I broke down for about 3 hours. My fiance came home knowing none the wiser, but had brought my favorite dish from her work, brewery, cause she knew I was feeling down. I've never told her that was the night I decided not to pull the trigger. In elementary school, we had a program called DARE, where a police officer would come into our class and teach us about the dangers of substance and alcohol abuse. At the end of the year, he prompted us to write an essay about what we learned over the course of the year in DARE. He also advised us that the author of the best essay in the class would receive a stuffed lion, appropriately named Darren. Now I really wanted this lion, but the problem with that was my writing skills were those of a typical 3rd grader. There was no way that anything I wrote about my time in DARE would stand out enough from my fellow classmates to win Darren. So I did what any desperate 10-year-old would do. Googled DARE essay contest winners, and then plagiarized the first one that came up in my searches. Now this was done diligently, carefully proofreading to ensure that I wasn't going to turn in an essay with somebody else's name in it somewhere. I went through and changed phrasing or a word here and there, but by no means would it pass through Turnitin.com with less than 90% plagiarized. Confident in my chances of winning Darren, I turned in the essay to Mr. Officer, and what do you know? A week later we had our end of year reception at the municipal building, which also contained the police station. He listed the top 3 essays, 3rd place, 2nd place, and then he said, holding Darren, the best DARE essay submitted this year was written by LAKEY. Come on up here, get your Darren stuffed animal, and read your essay to us please. I was so excited I won the animal, it was never even a thought that crossed my mind that I would have to deliver this speech. So I reluctantly walked up, took my stuffed animal, and all I can remember at this point is shaking so bad, it looked like I was going to fall over at the mic. All of my classmates, all of their parents, and the entire local municipality's worth of police officers with their full attention on me, a 10-year-old little fraud of a student. To this day, it's one of my most shameful moments, and I still have Darren sitting on my desk for discouragement from copying others' work. When I was a college freshman, I tried to boil 3 eggs then fell asleep. I woke up to a smell. I went to the stove and the water was completely gone from the pot. So like an idiot I got some water in a big bowl and poured it into the pot. You probably know where this is going. The eggs exploded like dynamite. Scalding hot egg hit my face. It blew me back and knocked me to the floor. Here's the scary part. I felt my face and looked at the egg on my finger but thought it was burnt skin coming off my face. I almost started crying. How badly burned was I that my facial skin came off to the touch? I walked to the bathroom, shaking, and looked in the mirror. I expected to see a horribly disfigured face, but I saw egg and eggshells. I wiped it with my hand and felt incredible relief. I also felt incredibly stupid. But so what, right? I spent the next hour cleaning egg off the ceiling, the walls, the floor, etc. My face was red for a couple days. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.